We live? Okay. Welcome, folks. It is 6:01 on October 2nd, and we will call the Community Development meeting to order. And we'll start off by noting the attendance that Councilmember Johnson is present, as well as Councilmember Christensen. Councilmember Watton is also in attendance tonight. We have the mayor and interim city administrator. And I do not see Councilmember Mayhew, though he had indicated that he might be joining us remotely. Yes.
He appeared to be frozen. Is stuff working, Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yep, there's Councilmember Mayhew.
All right.
I do see Councilmember Mayhew in the attendees.
We're unfrozen.
Wait for us to move them over anyway. Yep. All right. I see Councilmember Mayhew has joined us. There we go. All right. Councilmember Mayhew, if you could let us know if the internet cuts out.
You're fine right now. Hear you just fine.
Okay, then let's go ahead and get on with it. So then for the agenda, any comments from the committee on the agenda? And if not, we will consider it adopted. Okay, then we'll, yes, Councilor.
It's up to you, Chair, but you might want to take the first two items in reverse order just because of the length of relative conversation, but up to you.
Okay. Unless there's objection, we'll do that. Okay. Then for public comments, I do not see any members of the public present here in the chambers. I will check online. If you did want to speak, you could raise your hands. And if not, then we will close the public comments section. Okay. That takes us to the minutes. And I did not have anything to add or change. Other committee members? Okay, then we'll go ahead and consider the minutes approved and move on to our first agenda bill, which in reverse order is going to be AB 23-118, which is the wireless communication facilities permit and conditional use permit discussion. And who's going to lead us on this?
Yeah, we have our contract planner, Andrew Levins, available to provide you an overview of the agenda bill and what is being proposed to move forward to council.
Okay,
Andrew, are you there?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I just had a little glitch there, but I'm online now. So regarding this agenda item, it is an application for a major wireless facility, a macro cell wireless facility as defined by the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. The application proposes to construct a stealth structure antenna on top of an existing non-residential building located in Snoqualmie Ridge at 7917 Center Boulevard. Based on staff's review of the application, staff recommended approval. Staff recommended that the hearing examiner recommend approval to the city council. On a hearing that occurred September 11th, the hearing examiner took and created the record and issued a recommendation of approval to the city council. Overall, it's not too complicated of an application. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm open to here to answer them.
One thing that I wanted to know is this a quasi judicial proceeding in which our opinions of what we wish that it would look like are not relevant, but we are just strictly confined to the facts of what is being presented, what does the code say, etc.
Yes, that's correct. It's a category 3 decision. So your decision should be based on the record established by the hearing examiner.
Councilmember Christensen.
I was just gonna ask, so if we're within that category 3, are we really supposed to be discussing it now, or should we be going to council for any discussion?
That was my next question too, is this really the appropriate forum to talk about it?
Yeah.
That I am not exactly sure how the community development committee discussions typically occur. This is my first one, but I think that this is just an opportunity for it to be presented to the community development committee and eventually make its way to council.
Okay.
I believe yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely do have some concerns that could require an executive session of sorts, for legal counsel and that sort of thing. So I think that we might want to go to the full council and have an executive session on it. That's my thought. Councilmember Christensen.
I agree completely, and would also not necessarily want to engage in conversations without our legal counsel present on site. Or at least on Zoom.
Yeah, just given the nature of the decision that we're making, that's my thought. Councilmember Mayhew, you look thinking.
Yeah, I'm trying to obviously not knowing the concerns that either of the other council members have, so I'm just sort of catching up to potentially where they could be. I did have what I thought was 2 minor questions I don't think would be a problem, but
Okay.
I suppose the concern you have, Chair, is that with only 3 of us here, we start to have information that the rest of the council has, and you're concerned that maybe is problematic in terms of the record and the ultimate decision making. Am I right?
Not being a lawyer, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just very clear. I definitely have no law expertise, so I'm definitely a little bit in the dark on that front. But yeah, that'd be my concern. But I mean, if you're comfortable asking your questions, I'm not going to stop you. Good. Yeah, Councilmember Mayhew, go ahead.
Yeah, my questions are not that don't need to be answered tonight. They can wait. So I would move that we forward this agenda bill for full council consideration on the regular agenda.
Second.
Okay. And then do the other committee members have a thought on us preemptively requesting an executive session?
I'd be fully supportive of that.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay, then let's go ahead and do that. Let's plan on having executive session at our next council meeting to just maybe remind a few folks. There may be a council member or 2 that haven't been present for a decision like this, who also might want to have the opportunity to get caught up on that.
Someone has raised their hand on.
Yes, I do see. Let me scroll, see if I can see who that is. Yes, Stevenson.
Yeah, hi. I'm representing the applicant Dish Wireless. So how does this affect the timeline? Because I was informed by the planner that this would be going to City Council next Monday, the 9th. Will this decision affect that timeline at all?
I don't think so.
It is on the agenda still, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that shouldn't affect that timeline.
So yeah, sorry, I've never done a Snoqualmie.
That said, just to be clear, just it going to council doesn't mean it will be approved on that date. It's up to the council to decide what's going to happen. So yeah.
Okay, understood. So an executive meeting would just be you guys answering, asking questions, and the like, basically.
Right, of legal counsel, because again,
Point of order.
Us are not lawyers. Yes, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, Chair, just given that this is quasi judicial and only a subset of the council's present, I wonder, I'm very uncomfortable with communications with the applicant. Can we refer those to administration to handle?
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you, Councilmember Mayhew.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Mayhew.
just to clarify, and this may help the applicant, the motion I just made was that we put this on the agenda for Monday's council meeting. So that is moving forward on that timeline.
Thank you. Okay, then unless there's any further discussion, let's go ahead and consider that adopted. Councilmember Mayhew.
Or just two minor clerical comments. You know, one thing, and maybe Chair, you could take this up separately with administration if you agree with it. Or, you know, I think some of our generally I've become increasingly concerned with some of our background sections. This background section in this agenda bill has 3 sentences. Seems like the middle sentence doesn't need to be there, would be more appropriate. I'm sorry, let me try that again. Introduction. It has the introduction has 3 sentences. The middle sentence seems like to be more appropriate in the background. But anyway, I leave that to you, Chair. And then the only other comment I had is it would be nice, I think, when we have upcoming, when we look at our agenda in the upcoming items section, it would have been nice, since we already knew this was coming a while ago. How do I know that? Because we scheduled a hearing examiner and so forth. There were public notices sent out. It might have been nice if this had been noted on our committee as an upcoming item. Just, you know, I know we're all working. I know we're going to spend more time tonight on this with the council priorities, but just in terms of making our process work a little better, you know, I'd recommend putting things like this on just to let us know it's coming to our committee so we sort of see it coming a little farther away.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. Noted. Okay, then with where did this thing go? Okay, with no further comments on this item, we'll go ahead and move that on to council. Non-consent, right? Okay. And that takes us to item number 2 for agenda bills, the council priority tracker. Scrolling on down here. So this is the list of things for each of the committees that we have been looking at over the last year. And these were all priorities that we came up with at our council retreat. There was one item that I didn't see on the list on this page where I thought it should go, but I didn't see on any of the other pages either, which was affordable housing. But that was the only thing that I thought was missing from the list. But what I'd like to do is let us have a conversation here. It's just like Councilmember Mayhew, I feel like is always asking us to do. Let's just have a conversation about what do we agree with those on the list? Should anything come off? Is there anything else that the rest of the committee thought was missing, and maybe just an update from the city on a few of these items that we know have existed, but just we haven't been entirely sure exactly what the progress is. Doesn't have to be a big deal, but just sort of like yeah, this is doing that. Cool, thanks, thumbs up. So I did add mine. We are going to have a discussion or a let me find the agenda here, see how it's exactly presented. An update from the housing roundtable with Councilmember Watton toward the end of our meeting here, probably right after this item. But anyway, so with that, I'll open up to the rest of the committee to see if there's anything else you wanted to add or take away, or any other questions. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah. So again, this is I think you've heard me get effusive on how positive I think this as a tool, how positive I feel about this. I had a couple thoughts. The first was I would really like to see us use this. So my thought is tonight we're going to try to sort of add or subtract or whatever, improve, if you will, the listing that's here. But what I thought would be good is if in future meetings, there are several of these, and I think you just alluded to this, Chair, there are several of these where I would like to hear an update of where we're at. So maybe that could then guide, what goes on to our agenda in some of our future meetings. Not necessarily trying to put people on spot tonight, but would love to hear some updates on some of these. With that said, I had several items. First off, the items that are there, I had a few questions about, but they're relatively minor. I think the things that are there are fantastic. What I thought perhaps also should be there, and perhaps when this list is organized, maybe some of the things that are there get organized under some categories. But what I thought was missing, first off, was affordable housing as a category. So I agree with you, Chair, on that. And in my mind, there were sort of three main subgroupings under that. Don't know if you all agree, but about affordable housing, I thought use of city-owned land for that purpose, use of the city's dedicated funds for that purpose. We have sales tax and some other funds that are specifically for use on affordable housing. They're accumulating now. They're not huge sums, but they're sums that can make a difference if we deploy them well. So use of city-owned lands, use of dedicated funding. And then third was use of policy tools. So things like expanding the use of what we started out with an MFTE program, or, well, there's a whole range of policy options that are available that we could try to use. So having these as topics, exploring those three categories, I would see. And then maybe some of the things like, for example, Snoqualmie mill site development seems like that's one of the things under affordable housing. It's more than affordable housing, but a big thing that happened there is some affordable housing. So that was one. Second was the category of increasing tourism to support Snoqualmie businesses as a category. This is something that this committee, at least historically, has always spent a fair amount of time on. There's a commission that works on that topic. So it's something that we spend a lot of time on. That commission reports into this committee. So increasing tourism to support Snoqualmie businesses as a second category. And then third category was prioritize desired features or prioritize desired priorities. That doesn't make sense. Prioritize desired features or priorities for potential UGA annexation. So we spent time earlier this year in this committee talking about that whole notion of UGA annexation, the whole idea of what would be useful. The city would look favorably on from proposals and so on, trying to develop that seemed like a category. Let's see, two others were impact. And I don't know if this is the correct committee. I think it might be, but I'm not positive. But evaluating the impact on city development of the FEDA trust developments of the last year. So that impacts tax revenues, it impacts service requirements. There's a whole set of impacts that impact city development, loss potentially of some tax revenues that are used for that purpose. So maybe that is a category to sort of have, at least if this, whatever committee is appropriate, maybe this one, start digging into how we're going to, respond to that. Seemed like a category. And then lastly, it seemed like, I know, we're in the middle, of course, of working on the comp plan. So I thought the elements of the comp plan, the major elements of the comp plan, are going to have objectives in them, and trying to match those into whatever activities we're going to do in that regard that are community development. So land use occurred to me, but anyway, trying to match up some of those into some of the activities here. So that's a big list that I just mentioned. Some of that is, longer term, but I just thought, now's the time we're sort of trying to build that out. And so those are the ideas that I had. A few little questions that are minor on some of the stuff in there, but those are the main ideas I wanted to share.
Thank you, Councilmember Mayhew. I do see that there is a topic about the UGA, but I believe that that is just about the boundaries.
Yeah, to be honest, Chair, I had no idea what that item was referring to. That's one of the things that I'm a little bit mystified. I just put a bunch of question marks around it. So, so maybe it is the item that I'm speaking to. I just couldn't tell, but UGA boundaries seemed like a different idea than you know, desired uses that our city would have, and that the council would therefore look favorably on in annexation requests from a developer. Seemed like a different issue than just what the boundary is.
Yeah. Councilmember Christensen.
That makes sense. I'm in agreement with a lot of them. I wasn't, affordable housing was also on my list. And then for the human services program, I know that it says to distribute the remaining funds, and to request information on the accountability. But one of the things that I'd also love to talk about at some point is not only like how we're planning to provide human services in the future, but also just, I guess, having the discussion around what do we have now and where are the gaps? And I don't know if that would be appropriate for here or somewhere else, but I think especially as our population continues to grow, we need to make sure we have the appropriate services in place and how we could attract potential new service providers as needed.
Yes, I was thinking about that as well. Let me find the, there we go. Yes, I was thinking about that as well. Sort of what are human services and then what are the gaps? So I think that's important too.
I did also, I couldn't remember on the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, Retail Code Amendment. It looks like we discussed it back in April, but I was just hoping for some additional information on that because I don't have the strongest recollection of what was discussed at that point or where that was left.
Yeah, I think that what we could do is to give the staff the ability to compile a few thoughts so that they're a little bit more prepared. Maybe we could send in a couple of questions about things that we'd like to know more about so that they could come to our next meeting and say, okay, so here are those particular items that you're more interested in. Here's a little bit more information about what that was and where it's currently at. I did have another question about similarly the Northwest Railway Museum Roundhouse project. Is that also a quasi-judicial proceeding? And if so, is that really something that is for a committee to discuss? Interim City Administrator.
And my answer is I think there's several throughout the document. But go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, we're just at a clear and grade permit right now. So, but other permits will be required as we get down the road. We're just not, we haven't received those applications yet.
Okay, so it's still okay to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd love to get an update on that one too, just sort of where it's at in the process. Like what's left, not necessarily right this minute, but
we've only received a clear and grade permit.
Okay.
And I think funding is one of the main sources of delay.
Okay. Other thoughts on this item presently? I think we've got a few things to add here. I definitely agree with adding the idea of tourism and expanding tourism. Separating the idea of either changing or somehow influencing the boundaries of the UGA versus what would be there. So yeah, let's go ahead and add those items that the other two council members had discussed. And unless there's any other discussion on this, we could move forward. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, just as I mentioned, just sort of more minor thoughts. In the next steps column, it might be worth making that section a bit bigger and saying a bit more. Like, now I know maybe that's being done in the notes section. So however we do it, in the next step section, like for example, the Roundhouse project was the one that in particular I didn't understand in the sense of I know what a clearing and grading permit is. What I don't know is broadly how that fits into whatever's being discussed. So, obviously there's a roundhouse project. Obviously it has something to do with funding. Maybe, there's a time, maybe something that would just tell us a bit more about what is this thing? And yeah, we're at this section, this step, but this step, what are all the steps? What is that? Just sort of a little bit broader picture of this. Look, we're at step one of something that takes 8 years, or we're at step one of something that takes 1 week. I don't know the answer. So, we're at step one and all steps will be done in a week is a lot different than all steps will be done in a much longer time frame. So, and not that I need to know every single little step. I just didn't get a sense of this project broadly and where we're at. So maybe just a little bit more on next steps and timing is what I was kind of getting at there. So, look, we're at early steps. There's a whole bunch of steps and probably take place, they're thinking over, X years or something, just something to get us a little more orientation to it. I thought would be helpful. So, and then the only other thing I wrote I was curious about the retail code. If that's what I think it is, my question was, why is this stalled out and can we get that moving? I didn't, the middle housing row refers to some discussions. I didn't know what those discussions were. So that kind of left me baffled. So maybe a little more explanation there. And then, let's see, and it had a date of June 23 on it, which is in the past. So I was a little bit confused. Is this a done thing or is this something yet to be done? If it was done, what was it that we did? I just wasn't clear on that thing. And then lastly, just kind of for each of these, I was kind of wondering what's the outcome that we're trying to get to. So roundhouse project, I think is, it's going to hopefully bring in more tourism. I just wasn't quite sure what each of these, I was sort of guessing as to outcome. And if we sort of were a little more explicit on the expected outcome for the city, that might be helpful. Maybe that's too hard to do. If that's not realistic, then never mind. But I just thought I'd bring it up.
Right. So sort of what it was supposed to be achieved by the end date. Is this a policy that we're supposed to adopt? Is this a building that's supposed to be built? I think something that just tells us what's supposed to actually happen might be helpful.
Yes, that. And what benefit then would that thing produce for the city? So we expect it to increase tourism, or we expect it, something like that. I mean, sometimes that's just implied, so it doesn't need to, I was a little wishy-washy if that was necessary, but there was at least 2 of the things on here. I just wasn't clear what outcome we were trying to cause. So yeah, I just wasn't sure what outcome we were trying to cause. I was sort of guessing. So like the floodplain, I think the outcome is just more affordability for our residents, but we didn't say that. So it just in some cases wasn't clear to me. It was clear to me what we wanted to do, update the maps, but to what outcome? I think it's lower premiums. Anyway, I just wasn't sure. So I don't care about that item right now. I'm just sort of making the point of knowing what, like you said, Chair, what's going to happen by a date, and then, by the way, what outcome to the city does that get us?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
Nope. Sorry. Nope.
Okay, then that will take us to the end of the agenda bills, and we are now on to item 4. The Economic Development Commission Support for Economic Alliance MOU. And who's going to cue this up for us? Here we go. Councilmember Watton.
All right. Thank you, Chair Johnson. Let me give you just a brief overview. Last week at the Economic Development Commission, I introduced the idea of the Snoqualmie Valley Economic Alliance. And this was brought forward through King County Department of Local Services. We were encouraged to apply for a grant through the USDA, and it happened to be that the North Bend address of Snow Valley Innovation Center fit into that piece. But we realized starting in March, and other groups had started back in October, that we were a little bit behind in the 8 ball. So what we have initiated is an alliance across the valley. We have engaged the 4 community development directors of the city of North Bend, Snoqualmie, Carnation, and Duval into this discussion, with the idea that we bring the 4 cities together, similar to the work that we accomplished on SR 18, to be able to go out for grants as a group or individually or together, to help economic development across Eastern King County. And rather than compete against one another, that we would work in collaboration together. And so that is the purpose of the MOU. And what I'd like to do is introduce it today and go out to at least 1 or 2 other cities and make presentations there as well to get some feedback, and then bring it back home here. But at least for transparency, I want you to see this first and what we're looking at. There is no financial obligation for the city. But one of the issues that we'd like to tackle is the fact that King County means that we're part of an urban area designated by the state for things like the film industry. There are no incentives for film companies coming to East King County to do filming that's allowed in other counties throughout the state. And that's a tax incentive that we'd like to see happen here. And so the one way we can tackle that is by banding together and then approaching the state on that. But there is no financial commitment, as I mentioned. All it is an upside of us working together. And I think that for the 4 cities in particular, it could be beneficial in that area of economic development, where it may not justify having a full-time economic development director for each one, but we can share some of the resources together. Other things, we'll bring together nonprofits like Empower Youth, and they've been involved in this in our discussions. It will also allow us to work with the 3 chambers, so they're not competing against one another, they're all helping each other. So that is really what I want to accomplish tonight, is to at least let you see what the MOU looks like and to give feedback. But I think it would behoove us to go out and get feedback from the other cities. So do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I definitely did see this statement here that said there are no formal procedures or a body of decision makers. It just allows the agencies to coordinate efforts to achieve mutually beneficial interests. So I'm just wondering, what does this change?
Well,
why don't we do that anyway?
So when we went to apply for the USDA grant, it said, show us your partners that you have. That's what this would formalize, is we have this group that we're already working together in coordination, and they want to see that it's more than just a very small sector that's working on it. So they're looking for just kind of the economies of scale, and that we have an ecosystem to help support whatever it is that we're looking to do. And the other thing, the USDA, what was kind of interesting with that was it would really benefit Carnation. However, Carnation couldn't apply for it. North Bend could. And so if we can just be able to broaden the reach and because what's good for Carnation is good for us, and what's good for North Bend can also benefit us as well. So just kind of a regional partnership.
Yeah, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just want to say, this is a fantastic idea. I spent some time with this over the weekend and today, just trying to make sure I understood it. And there's no downside here, as Councilmember Watton, as you just pointed out. This is about, it's not taking anything from anyone. It's just saying, hey, there's some stuff out there that if we can speak together on, we'll have a better voice, a louder voice, and we may be able to go after some funding that alone is harder for us to get. You just gave that example. So I think this is fantastic. I support you 100% in this. Let me know how I can help, but I think this is a great idea. I think, you know, one of the frustrations I've had is the way funding works. Places like the Snoqualmie Valley kind of get left out. You take unincorporated King County out here. I know this is one of the frustrations our county council members have had, is how much of unincorporated King County is in the Snoqualmie Valley, and what a disproportionately low amount of funds for roads come here. You know, granted, we expect most of the money to go where most of the population is, but we don't even get our percentage fair share. Take Metro. You know, the amount of tax money that Metro collects in the Snoqualmie Valley as compared to what they spend on services in the Snoqualmie Valley is disproportionately low. So this is the kind of thing that, you know, those are two examples I just pulled up, but I think, Councilmember Watton, I think you're after just a lot of economic opportunity, and I just couldn't be happier to more supportive of what you're doing here. I think this is a great idea. I think this is a great MOU you've got.
Thank you. So tomorrow we are part of the cohort 2, and this is the Snow Valley Innovation Center, which came through the Economic Development Commission here. But we're one of, I believe, 8 organizations across the state working with the Department of Commerce on just doing exactly this, is building out our ecosystem, of bringing partners on. And I was on the phone today with the department, and they were very excited about what we're working on with this MOU. So there are more things to come. It's great having organizations like King County Local Services on board, and also the support of the Department of Commerce from the state, helping to support us. And by the way, I do want to give a shout out to Angelique Dodge. She's works for the Department of Local Services. All the support. So there's nothing been requested from the cities. All the support has been coming from King County. It's not coming from my time away. It's nice having the dedicated service that Angelique has provided us. So more to come on that. Thank you.
One last thing that I have then is just, is there a next step in the MOU, or is?
I think what I need to do is go out and make presentations, and Angelique and I will be making those presentations to each of the cities through their committees. And then once we have some feedback, come back before we go to the city council with any refinement to this. So I think just hold on, wait and see, and we'll be back.
All right. So there could be like a resolution in the future for the council to adopt.
Or something.
It will be through Director Arteche.
Yeah, there'll be a resolution with authorizing the mayor to sign the MOU, as long as the other cities are in agreement and there are no other changes.
Okay. Well, thank you. Anything else?
I was just gonna say, generally speaking, I think that it does sound like a wonderful idea. Just run it by legal before we sign off.
Yeah,
And I look forward to
Absolutely.
hearing the updates. But yeah, I think it's great anytime we can extend our reach and our partnerships. I think that's
It-
wonderful.
That's a very good point. This actually went through King County's legal before it came to us too. So it has had one set of eyes on it, but it is,
But with different,
yes, different
current client,
lens.
yeah.
Right. Right. Okay, very well. Am I up for the next one?
I believe so. So you might just hang out there. Yeah, the next item is the housing roundtable update, which is also from Councilmember Watton.
Thank you. So on, help me out, September 12th, 14th, we held a housing roundtable here, and Councilmember Christensen was present as well. We had 16 participants in the room. And I was expecting, after 3 hours of walking away with my tail between my legs, saying, you know, Rob really shouldn't get this excited about coming up with ideas. But it was actually the exact opposite. I walked away with a lot more enthusiasm for the potential. And we've been looking at a various number of city-owned properties, parcels that came to be with the development of Snoqualmie Ridge, basically where Hauser gave us property that wasn't developable back then. It was, they were all have a touch of wetlands in them and sensitive areas. But the one property that we did dive down into looking at is ending in 9033. And I don't know if, Emily, if you have that available, Director Arteche, where you could show where that's at, but I can describe it. If you go up the parkway, it's the area that sits below the current Habitat property, the end of Gravenstein. There's about 28 acres in total between 3 parcels the city owns, and Director Arteche did a cursory look at it, and there's at least 1 acre developable. So part of our breakout session, we had 2 breakouts, one to look at this, one to look at S21, which is property by the hospital. And that was the one that Councilmember Christensen was in that breakout. And we're pulling up 9033 on the Parkway. And there's a lot of exciting things to talk about, but let me tell you who was in my group. It was Chris Padine, who was referred to me by Councilmember Johnson, has become my new best friend. Chris is the principal of Atlas Design.
To pause for the recording to just cut out, or are we
Oh.
okay?
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that we're still okay on the recording. All right,
Okay,
keep going.
thank you. So Mr. Padine has his business Atlas Design Group on Snoqualmie Ridge. He lives just outside the city here in Snoqualmie. He's a project developer, engineer, consultant. Scott Starr. Scott has been involved in my affordable housing forums for a number of years. He is the principal with SMR Architects. He is probably the most sought after architect when it comes to affordable housing, multifamily projects in the Northwest. Everybody that I speak to in the industry, the nonprofits, they just, they speak very admirably about Scott. And then Jason Simpson, he is the principal of Latitude 48 and also a resident of Snoqualmie. He has an engineering firm. And so they looked at this property and they said, you know what? There are a lot of good things about it. I said, you know, wait a moment, it's next to wetlands, which is down at 9036 and 9103. I said that, you know, there's this grading problem because at the end of Gravenstein, at the left side, it drops off about 35 feet, 40 feet. And they said, you know what, though, that property drains properly. It goes to the right direction. We talked about the need for parking, and they said, okay, we could figure that out. And what are the pluses? Well, one is it's shrouded by trees. That drop, the elevation drop means you could put a structure there and it wouldn't look as large as it actually is. They said, you know, the utilities are there, the street access. Amy Biggs got really excited about this because of the access for public transportation. The walkability, because it's, you know, a mile up the parkway to our center street services, mile and a half down.
Where is the nearest bus stop to that?
We're going to build one.
No. Put one in.
We're going to build one. And no, it's at Orchard currently.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that too. It's a small footprint. It's so this property, as Director Arteche took a look at it, and we said, okay, what size of a building? It could be up to a 4-story building with parking on site. And we talked about it could be 1 bedrooms, efficiency size apartments. And there are some concerns about traffic impact that we need to address. And market analysis, you know, how big of a market is there for 1 bedrooms or studios? So there's some considerations there. Here's the other thing. It is 28 acres total if we include the other parcels, mostly wetlands. And we know the formula is 12 units per acre. So we really don't have the limitations. We could potentially put as many as 100 units on this piece of property. So I think the other things too to keep in mind is Director Chambliss pointed out that he'd like to have a bus pullout on the parkway. There is area at the very top of 9092 where it's wider. There's a berm, but then there's a place where soil was pushed out and created this island out there. And I'd like to look at doing a bus stop there and connecting it with a wetlands improvement area and consider that for the opportunity for schools to come in and be able to use that for an environmental science research area, whatever it might be. Could be 6th graders. We're not talking about college. But so anyway, I think there are a lot of pluses, and this is what I'd like for us to do. I've talked with Bellwether Housing and I said, come on out. We'd love to show you the site. And they said, nah, not until you do an RFP. So I would like the committee to direct whomever, staff, to put together a plan for an RFP. And it could possibly be the public policy committee that exists for Snoqualmie Valley Housing Task Force to kind of say, okay, this is what we want. And obviously our need is for workforce housing between 50 and 80% AMI. So I pass it back to you to decide, how do we go forward? But I think it's something worthwhile. And I think if we put it out an RFP now, invite nonprofits and for-profit builders to come out and visit the site. Scott Starr, the outstanding architect, said, I will be there and help them with that. We've got 2 engineers that are willing to come out and walk the site with prospective builders, and we see what we get back. If we do this soon enough, we could be breaking ground by mid-year 2026.
Okay. Is it possible that Arch could be interested in the site?
I
Or is it
would
too small?
include everyone who's a potential developer and let them decide if they're going to. Here's the one thing that I want you to keep in mind, and that is what I've heard over the years from developers is they need 100 units in a community to make it feasible. So that kind of limits who we have apply. And I've talked to others that said, hey, you know, our work list is full. We just don't have the capacity, and we're going to find that. But all that we need, 2 or 3 that are interested and bring plans forward. And by the way, we've got 2 lenders, Banner Bank and Umpqua Bank, involved in this, and they're very interested in making something happen. One is Dustin Coons, he lives here, and the other one's an associate of mine that flew all the way over from Spokane twice now to help us with finding some solutions.
That was definitely the other question, is how to make the money work.
Exactly.
Okay, so then for an RFP, staff might have to give me a little refresher on exactly what needs to go into that. Is that something that the housing task force would come up with? Here's what we're looking for, and then we go to CDC, then to council. Yeah, I see. Councilmember Mayhew.
Well, yeah, so first off, Councilmember Watton, this is really exciting. So I have a bunch of questions. That's good. That's because this is an exciting thing to have questions about. So one has questions. So you know, this has been always discussed and intended, that lot, for exactly the kind of development that you're talking about. The concern has always been the high cost of construction on a hillside like that. And some of the other stuff you talked about, you know, abutting on wetlands, but it just makes it, you know, more expensive and harder to build on. So it sounds like you've been grappling with exactly those issues. So that's great. One of the questions in my mind, but I really have a few more comments, is request for proposal for what? I don't even know what we're talking about here. Are we talking about a city-owned housing building? I'm not clear what we're talking about, so that's got me a little confused. But setting that aside, I'm trying to understand what we're trying to accomplish here and what we as a city would put into the deal, because it seems to me what we put in will have an enormous impact on whether someone is interested in doing something here. I made some guesses as you were speaking. I made note that you mentioned 4 stories. My guess is, but I have no idea if it's right. My guess is that exceeds our zoning height limits. But that's fine if that's true. That's something that we can, I'll very loosely use the terms throw into the deal, is we could say, hey, we would be willing to do some things with height. You discussed, Councilor Watton, some of the reasons why that might not at all be objectionable, given the hillside, the trees, etc., what surrounds, you know. So that's above and beyond just the question of getting some affordable housing, which is fantastic. So I wrote down, I'm guessing that you're saying one of the ways we could get affordable units into this. So I wasn't clear if you were just saying get it done. I'm pretty sure you're saying to get affordable units as part of this thing, is that we might be looking to do some zoning things. And then I assume you're saying we might be able to do a in essence, throw in the land, meaning, like $1 a year lease for a long period, or, something where we're putting the land in, so we're taking that. And again, that in exchange for what? Not just for some developer, it's in exchange for affordable housing. I assume that's kind of part of the deal. So it also occurs to me, we've got an MFTE tax credit that now can be expanded for other locations. So maybe we would be looking at that. So my thought was, I'm kind of excited, but I'm kind of like, so if my reaction was, let's head towards an RFP. I'm still not quite sure what the proposal is, because I think the city owning this is probably not. Yeah, I'm putting words in your mouth. You didn't say the city was going to own this, but anyway, someone's going to own this. But so I just was unclear what the proposal would be. But more importantly, I think before we do that, let's put as much into this from the city as we can, so that when this request goes out, we say, here's the things we're willing to do: land, height, etc., whatever it is, MFTs, whatever it is. Let's get those things in place. I think if they're not in place, the proposals will be much more skeptical and may not even come. Someone really want to put in all the time for 100-unit proposal if it's iffy whether this city's even going to give all the pieces. Let's do our work. Let's do it quickly. I, for one, am tired of waiting around. We might even be able to help to some degree. We've got some funds for affordable housing. It's not a huge amount, but it's something. So it seems to me there's a whole bunch of pieces we could throw in. My thought is, I can't think of a thing that I'd rather spend time on in this committee than let's get this, or and I don't know if that's where it should be, but let's get it done. Let's put as many pieces as we can. Let's get those pieces through council. And then let's put out this proposal, I guess, RFP, and say, here's what we're willing to do now. What will you give us proposers for that? And I'd say, let's develop that. I don't think that's, I think there's a lot of political work in there before the staff can do anything, but maybe it's in conjunction. Like, I'd like to see it move forward, but I think we've got some work to do before we can get to a proposal.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is something that the task force could bring back to the CDC, essentially answering those questions.
I think, all those comments are spot on, Councilmember Mayhew. Director Arteche, I'm going to put you on the spot. And I'm sure that Ashley captured everything that was brought out, because those were perfect questions. Thoughts?
I was just going to say executive session.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
Because we're talking
Very
about
well.
using city land and stuff.
Right.
And
There would be a number of pieces, I assume,
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
even to the next step.
So do you want this on the next agenda for CD?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else for me?
Unfortunately, we are at the end of our meeting. So let me
you.
just take a quick peek at the agenda again, just to make sure that there wasn't anything else.
We missed
super
land use.
critical. Yeah, so that's gonna have to get kicked probably to the next meeting, unless there's something time critical that we absolutely have to do.
No, nothing time critical, but I would like to make sure that we do allocate the appropriate amount of time, because we may be faced with a backup situation where we get so backed up that we can't get some
Okay, let's try
momentum
to
moving,
Hit that at the top of the agenda for the next meeting then.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then there being no further business, unless there's an objection, then we will be adjourned. All right, then we are adjourned at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.